Hello and welcome to the Bhagavatam. Today we continue, and our journey is going to be extremely interesting. We're going to be talking about the ecstasy of love, longing and separation in divine love. Now, this topic is full of all kinds of interesting narratives and poems, and I'm going to give you quite a bit to listen to, so stay in there. And we've got a wonderful session up ahead, and we're also going to look into the disappearance of Krishna from this world, and that's got a lot behind it as well. So to give you context about that, I thought let's start off with a very simple question. Love. We all look for love in our life. We want love, we long for love, and when love leaves us, we are devastated. We feel a deep sense of loss and grief. And it's one of the most painful things that human beings experience. It is the one thing that we crave the most, and it is the one thing that causes us the greatest suffering as well. Now, just as everything else in this world has its spiritual counterpart, so also does love. We find that we look for happiness, and there is a kind of happiness that lies within all of us, a spiritual happiness that is not dependent upon things happening the way we want them to happen, but rather is independent of any situation. That happiness can be felt within ourselves, in our soul. And so also we will find love within ourselves. Now, this same love, if we experience it not just for ourselves, but also for another human being, or, and let's take it to the ultimate level, for God, what does that result in? It results in many of the same things that we would experience at a human level, but taken to a much greater level. In other words, the ecstasies you experience in a romantic relationship, multiply them thousands of times. But so also would be everything else. The attachment is thousands of times. The separation is thousands of times. And if there is a disconnect between you and that loving relationship with God, then the loss is also thousands, maybe millions of times greater. We all struggle with love, and perhaps one of the greatest places to understand love is to understand it in this source relationship, this relationship with the divine, with God, because there is no love like this. One might even say that the love that our romantic poetry and our romantic idealism seeks is actually that love of God, because we seek an eternal love. And that eternal love we are not able to find in this world. Each time we find ourselves disappointed. But that love, the love for the divine, or love for God, or divine love, whatever word you want to give it, that is an eternal love. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that, just to give you some background so you get to understand it at its depth, and you get to be able to see how beautiful, profound it is in all its facets, not just in its ecstasies, but also in its pain, and also in that pain is an ecstasy. So I'll take you through this whole wonderful journey today, and let's get started with that. All right, so in the past, you might remember that I've talked to you about how we can experience we can experience the divine or God as Brahman, that which is the energy in everything. We can also experience the divine as Paramatma, the great soul who is present in everyone, like the yogi sitting in the middle in that picture there. And we can also experience God as a Bhagavan, or as a being, as a person. All of these are possible. When it comes to having a relationship with God as a person, if you look at the top right, that is the picture of Arjuna from the Bhagavad Gita. And we've been going over the Bhagavad Gita in great length, and you know of Arjuna as Krishna's friend. And then Krishna reveals to Arjuna that he is the supreme being personified. On the left you see a different kind of love, the love of Meera for Krishna, and hers was a romantic love. And at the bottom you see Chaitanya, who I'm going to tell you more about today. The love for God the way most people approach God is in a very formal way. For them, God is great, and that love is conditional. God is there to take care of their needs. God is there to give them what they want. And if God doesn't do that, then God doesn't exist. But there is another kind of relationship we can have with God, and that is of God as our beloved. And that is based on unconditional love. And unlike the formal relationship, it is deeply intimate. When it comes to that intimate love, you'll find in the Bhagavatam, especially in the 10th canto, we're on the first canto right now, but in the 10th canto, you'll come across different kinds of love for God. And that love can be one which is on the left, you'll see Shantaras, which is kind of passive love, the way the cows and the deer and the peacocks would look at Krishna. Then you have Dasyaras on the right, which is in servitude, someone who is serving, like Hanuman serving Sita. So there is where you serve God. Then on the bottom left, you see Sakhyaras, where Krishna is there sitting with his friends and having lunch or dinner, and they're cracking jokes and having a fun time on a picnic. Then you have in the middle Vatsalyaras, or parental love for God. Now imagine not just God as your child, not just you as the child of God, but God as your child. Imagine how much more amazing that would be. And then finally, Madhurya Ras, which is romantic love for God. And here we see the ultimate of that romantic love, that is the love of Radha and Krishna. Now, some people misunderstand the love of Radha and Krishna and talk of Radha as his girlfriend, or Radha as his, lover, or Radha as just an ordinary cowherd girl who happened to become very special with Krishna. But that is not true. Radha, according to anyone who's gone deeply into the philosophy of bhakti or divine love, you will understand that Radha is Krishna's eternal consort. They have always been together. They are never separated. And the earth, for a little while, they were separated. But that's part of their lila, or their pastime. But Radha and Krishna are the eternal lovers. And just as we seek an eternal love, theirs is the original eternal love. All things that you come across in this world have their origin in God. Everything that you seek in this world has its origin in God, or its opposite, right? So you'll have exactly that, or its opposite. So there is light and there is shadow, and you'll see both in this world. But either way, they're connected to God. If there is a goodness that you find in God, or a beauty, or love when there is the darkness, or the opposite of that, or evil, you will find absence of love. You will find the absence of happiness, and so on and so forth. So Radha and Krishna should not be misunderstood in any way. It's a great offense, actually, to be able to think of them as just ordinary lovers or some such thing. However, when it comes to the gopis, or the friends of Krishna, they are actually his lovers. Let's talk about that. Oh, sorry about that. There we go. Right. Yeah, okay. So those are the gopis, or the sakhis as they're called, and they are the lovers of Krishna. So you can have all kinds of relationships with God. In fact, you can have any kind of relationship that you wish to have with God. That's Krishna in the middle, the gopis all around him, and they're playing in the river. You'll also see here where they're dancing in the Ras Leela. And in this case, Krishna becomes hundreds of Krishnas, and with each of the gopis, there is a separate Krishna who is dancing with her. Not in this picture, but in other ones you see that. And here you see when Krishna leaves them, they are dejected in separation, the deep sense of loss. Because when you have found that great of a love, when you have found the love of your life, and then that love goes away, even for a moment, you feel the tremendous sense of separation and loss. And even to this point where they're talking to the plants and to the trees and to the flowers, where is Krishna? Have you seen him? Have you seen him? So we're going to talk more about this, and to understand this deep sense of love, we're going to talk about someone who embodied this in the present day time, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who lived between the years 1486 and 1534 in Bengal, India. And we're going to read a poem of his called Shikshashtakam. And this is just such a profound work that it's just eight verses, but in that he encapsulates the entire essence of devotion. So yes, we're going to read about the poem by Chaitanya and understand its deeper implication. So this is Chaitanya, as you'll see here, dancing. He is the embodiment of Radha and Krishna, and he comes here to teach the method of purification or spiritual realization in the Kali Yuga, in this age of quarrel, hypocrisy, and dissension, where people are not inclined towards spirituality. And as I said earlier, he is the embodiment of Radha and Krishna. Krishna on the left, Radha on the right, and he is actually the embodiment of both of them. And he comes here to experience the love that they have for each other. Yeah, he comes here to experience that incredible love that they have for each other. And in this poem, you're going to understand something more about that. As I said, he comes to teach for two purposes. One is to teach us about the method of chanting Hare Krishna mantra, Sankirtan, for the purpose of elevation or spiritual realization in this age of Kali, and also to experience the love that Radha has for Krishna. There's a little story there. There's a time where they've left this world, Radha and Krishna have left this world, and they've gone back to the spiritual world, and one day Krishna is looking at a reflection of himself, and he notices he's so beautiful. And then he thinks to himself, what does Radha see in me that she's so in love with me? I cannot even begin to experience that quality of love. You know how, have you ever had that happen? When someone loves you or you love somebody and you love them way more than they love themselves. Like you have this intense, this passion for them. You have this intense beauty that you see in them, this intense way in which you adore them. Now imagine having the most beautiful being of all, God, in front of you and having this deep, passionate, romantic love for God. Radha had that and more. A love that you would give your life for, every moment for, right? So now Krishna is wondering, what does Radha see in me? I cannot see that in me. I cannot feel in me what she feels for me. So I'm going to come into this Kali Yuga, in this present time which started 5,000 years ago, and I'm going to experience her love for me. So he comes as Radha and Krishna combined in one body, and experiences the ecstasy of Radha's love. We're going to read a poem that was written by Chaitanya. And Chaitanya is known as this incredible incarnation, the once-in-a-lifetime incarnation of the divine. So let's get into that poem. It's beautiful. It's called the Shikshashtakam. Cheto darpanamarjanam bhavamaha. I think I'll just read you the translation. Cheto darpanamarjanam. It compares consciousness to a mirror. The soul, the consciousness, is like a mirror that is covered with dirt. And the job or the process in this of self-realization is one of cleansing the dirt within the heart. Cheto darpanamarjanam bhava mahadavagni nirvapanam Shreyakairava chandrika vitaranam vidyavadhu jivanam Anandam buddhivardhanam Pratipadam purnamrita swadanam Sarvatma snapanam Param vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam. Glory to Shri Krishna Sankirtan, the process of chanting the names of God, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life, of repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan, the chanting of the names of God, Sankirtan, Kirtan is the chanting and Sankirtan is doing it together. So you'll come across many singers now, they have in Bhakti Fest, Shakti Fest, so many different places, in different yogic societies as well, where they do Kirtan. And so that's what it is, when you chant together like that, it is this glorification or this meditation on the divine names of God. And the name of God is known to be none different than God. So Chaitanya continues, this Sankirtan is the prime benediction for humanity at large because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss, and it enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we are always anxious. He then continues, Nam Namakari Bahuda Nija Sarva Shakti Tatrapita Niyamita Smaranena Kalaha Etadrishi Tava Kripa Bhagavan Mamapi Durdevam Idrisham Mihajanina Anuragaha. O God, O my dear Sri Krishna, your holy name alone can render all benediction on all living beings. And thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names you have invested all your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O Krishna, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by your holy name. But I am so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. Now, again and again you'll find Chaitanya taking the position of the conditioned soul, of all of us, feeling himself inadequate, feeling himself unworthy. And I'll read, I read further, you'll begin to see this deeply being felt by him. You'll begin to understand what humility is, because humility opens the doors to divine love. Trinadapi sunichena tarorapi sahishnuna amanina manadena kirtaniya sadahari. One should chant the name of God in a humble state of mind. So humility, strongly emphasized here. One should chant the name of God in a humble state of mind. What does that mean? Thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. What happens to straw in the street? If you had a bunch of straw in the street, people would walk all over it. And in today's time, we say, oh, my self-esteem is being hurt if you walk all over me. No, but if this very same things that are so painful for the ego are nectar for the soul, when you understand from a spiritual perspective, the very thing that you are being, let's say, made fun of, or you are being insulted, or you are being walked all over, if you can see it from a spiritual perspective, and I'm not saying we're always able to, I know sometimes I fail at that because it's hard, the ego gets in the way. But if you are able to, then the very same thing, this feeling of unworthiness that the ego is trying to avoid, this feeling of I'm not good enough, or people are not going to like me, or whatever it might be, no one's going to love me, no one's interested in me, all of that becomes a blessing. So Chaitanya says one should think of oneself lower than the straw in the street, one should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the name of God constantly. Na dhanam, na janam, na sundarim, kavitam va jagadisha kamaye, mama janmani, janmani ishvare, bhavatad bhaktir ahaitukki tvai. Here he presents the secret to having uninterrupted, eternal love for God. He says, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women or partners, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotion, your bhakti, your love, life after life. Bhavatad bhaktir ahaitukki tvai. Ai nanda tanuja kinkaram patitam mam vishame bhavam budau kripaya tava pada pankaja stitadhuli sadrisham vichintaya. O Krishna, O son of Maharaj Nanda, I am your eternal servant, yet somehow or other I have fallen into the ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. The devotee sees himself in this way. I am inconsequential. I am of no value. But I beg of you, I am your eternal servant. Please pick me up from the ocean of birth and death and place me as one of the atoms at your feet. This is expressed even in the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna is talking about the difference between the yogi and the bhakta. The yogi performs meditation, does many, many different practices to elevate his or her consciousness. People say you got to do the work, right? But in bhakti, it is about this plea. It is about this calling out to the divine. It is like a child calling out to its mother. Mother, please help me. Dear Krishna, please help me. Oh Radha, please help me. I am not capable of doing this myself. So Krishna says that one who approaches me with surrender, with loving devotion, I personally pick them up from the ocean of birth and death and liberate them from the suffering of this world. You can do it yourself, or you can do it with divine help and support. Knowing how difficult this world is and how difficult it is to even control our mind, which is just the beginning, you might think that maybe a little bit of help might be useful. Nayanam galad ashrudharaya vadanam gadgada rudhaya gira pulakair nichitam vapu kada tavanam agrahane bhavishyati. Oh my dear Krishna, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love, flowing constantly when I chant your name? When will my voice choke up, and when will the hairs of my body stand on end at the recitation of your name? Now this was the kind of ecstasy that Chaitanya would actually experience. If you read his pastimes in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Charitamrita is the meaning the amrit, the nectar of his lila or his pastimes or his character, you will find in there how incredible that ecstasy is that he was experiencing in love of God. And he talks about it here. But he's not like, oh, I've attained this and oh my God, how great I am. No, no, no. When will my eyes be decorated with tears of love, flowing constantly when I chant your name? Now this is tears of love. Hear that. It is not tears of sorrow or pain or suffering, but tears of love. Then he goes on, Yugayitam nimeshena chakshusha pravashayitam shunyayitam jagat sarvam govinda virahenami. O Govinda, O Krishna, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I am feeling all vacant in this world in your absence. This is what separation looks like. This is what separation feels like, and we're going to talk more about that today. What happens when you find the ultimate love, the greatest love of all, and then you're separated? It's unimaginable. Tears are flowing like from my eyes like torrents of rain. He says, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more, and I am feeling all vacant in this world, like empty in your absence. Then he continues, Ashlishyava padaratam pinashtumam adarshanam marmahatam karotuva yatha tathana vidadhatu lampato mat prananathastu sa eva napara. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and he shall remain so even if he handles me roughly by his embrace or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He can freely do anything and everything, for he is my worshipful Lord unconditionally. So this is what unconditional love for God looks like. Unconditional. That means that it is not subject to God serving me. It is not about God doing things for me, but rather it is about me being able to serve God and love God. So it's just a whole different way of looking at things. And I encourage you to walk on this path and experience all of this for yourself, because it is available to all of us. So at this point we're going to enter into the Bhagavatam, and we're going to start chapter 15 about the Pandavas as they retire from this world. With great difficulty, Arjun checked the tears of... So now the background is this, that Yudhishtira had been seeing very inauspicious signs in the world. And we talked about this last time, but some of you missed it because our Zoom had crashed down. So Yudhishthira the king, had been seeing very inauspicious signs all over the world, and he was becoming worried. Something was wrong. He was noticing the seasons, things were going out of whack. He noticed that people were becoming more quarrelsome. He noticed that greed was increasing. He noticed that quarreling was increasing. He noticed that everything was sort of going weird all around him, and he didn't know what is happening. And meanwhile, Arjun, his brother, had gone to visit his friend Krishna hundreds of miles away in Dwarka. So Yudhishthira, the king, back in the capital Hastinapur, began wondering, maybe Krishna has left the world. Maybe this is why this is happening. Because when he was here, everything was great. Everything was wonderful. My entire kingdom, everything went beautifully out here. And around that time he's thinking this, Arjun arrives after 7 months of being gone and being with Krishna. And when Arjun arrives, Arjun is really besotted with grief, and Yudhishthira tries to wonder, what is happening? What's going on? Tell me. You know how it is when someone's in grief, they don't know how to speak, and he's not able to express himself, and he's just so choked up. So the Bhagavatam says, with great difficulty, Arjun checked the tears of grief that smeared his eyes. He could hardly utter a word in reply. Arjun said, O king, the Supreme Godhead, Krishna, who treated me exactly as an intimate friend, has left me alone. Ever since then, my astounding power, which astonished even the demigods, is no longer with me. See, Arjun was known to be the greatest archer and the greatest warrior of his time. Arjun was undefeatable. Nobody could tackle Arjun and win. There was Karna, maybe could have done it, but that's a different story in the Mahabharata. But Arjun was known for his prowess, and he was such a magnificent warrior, such a beautiful man. And now suddenly he says that all his power has left him. And Yudhishthira is like mind blown. What is going on? Arjun continues. He says, I have just lost him whose separation for a moment would render all the universes unfavorable and void, like bodies without life. See, when you've had that kind of relationship with God, with that as your friend and as your lover, that separation now is unbearable. Arjun began to recall all the ways in which Krishna had been there for him. He said, because he was near me, it was possible for me to conquer the powerful king of heaven, Indra, to defeat all the princes and win the hand of his wife Draupadi. Because of him, Krishna, Bhim, the brother of Arjun, was able to kill Jarasandha, who had the strength of 10,000 elephants. Arjun himself continues, he says, I was able to please Shiva and received his personal weapon, Pashupat. I was invited to the heavenly planets in this present body and was able to kill the demon Nivata Kavach, for which the demigods blessed him with many weapons. The military strength of the Kauravas was like an ocean. So this was the battle of Kurukshetra. The Kauravas were their enemy. It says their military strength was like an ocean in which there dwelled many invincible existences, and it was insurmountable. But because of his friendship, Krishna's friendship, I, seated on the chariot, was able to cross over that ocean. Great warriors and generals tried to kill me, but by his grace they could not even touch a hair on my head. Then he goes on to remember the softer side. He says, his joking and frank talks were pleasing and beautifully decorated with smiles. He would address me as "O friend," and all such heartiness and all of that, those words of his are now remembered by me, and thus I am overwhelmed. We would live and sleep and sit and loiter together. If there were any irregularities or mistakes on my part, or rather on his part, I used to reproach him by saying, my friend, you are very truthful, kind of being sarcastic. Even in those hours when his value was minimized, Krishna, being the Supreme Soul, used to tolerate all those utterings of mine, excusing me exactly as a true friend excuses his true friend, or a father excuses his son. Now I am separated from my friend and dearmost well-wisher, Krishna, and therefore my heart appears to be void of everything. In his absence, I have been defeated by a number of cowherd men. Now, these cowherd men don't even know how to use bows and arrows. They're not even great warriors. But they were able to defeat the great warrior Arjun while he was guarding the wives of Krishna. Now, Krishna had left, and his wives and his family was still here. Arjun continues, I have the same Gandiva bow, that great bow of his that he had, with which he could kill thousands of warriors. The same arrows, the same chariot drawn by the same horses. I used them as the same Arjun to whom all the kings offered their due respects. But in the absence of Lord Krishna, all of them, at a moment's notice, have become null and void. It is exactly like offering ghee on ashes, accumulating money with a magic wand, or sowing seeds on barren land. There's a powerful realization, a powerful takeaway that arises here if we would like to really listen and understand, and that is that whatever strength we have, whatever power we have, whatever gifts we have, if you are great at making money, or if you are great as a lover, or if you are great as a writer or a poet or an artist, or in your job, whatever skill you have, whatever talent you have, whatever ability you have, where did you get it from? You didn't make it. You didn't manufacture it. It wasn't bought on Amazon or some such place. It was given to you. It was bestowed upon you even with your birth. And those talents, those gifts, those abilities, those were given as a gracious gift. Just as every breath that we have and every breath that we take is a gift given to us. Just as every moment that we have of time is a gift given to us. And we take it for granted. The air we breathe, the sun. Without these things we would not be able to live. How would we live if there was no air? How would we live if there was no sun? How would we live if there were no vegetables and plants able to grow in the ground? How would we live? And as we go about destroying the planet, we're about to see the consequences of a godless world. But on the other hand, if we give gratitude to God, if we place our faith and trust in God, if we give our heart to God, we begin to understand the possibilities of how wonderful it is to know that there's someone there who cares about us, who blesses us, who gives us all these opportunities in life, who allows us all this freedom, does not control us. We're not like puppets on a string. And we don't have to bow down, and we don't have to obey. We don't even have to love this God. We can hate God for all we want. We can not believe in God if we don't want. We can do whatever we like and face the consequences in this world. We are free. But the wise understand that this freedom hasn't led us anywhere. These enjoyments of the world haven't truly satisfied our heart. They were wonderful, don't get me wrong, they're lovely. But they haven't satisfied my deepest yearning for joy. They haven't fulfilled me at the deepest level. No matter what I've got, no matter all the things I've had, no matter the partners I've been with, no matter who or what it is that allured me in the beginning, in the end it diminished more and more and more. And I began to wonder, maybe the next thing will do it, maybe the next thing. And that's how the treadmill goes on, and that's how the whole materialistic society carries on this treadmill, trying to get more and more. The next thing, the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And soon you're old, and then you die, and boom, it's over, right? So getting out of that treadmill is saying, where does all this come from? Where is all this? How is all this possible? How is it my heart keeps beating? How is it my lungs keep pumping in air? What makes all this happen? And then as you keep exploring that further, behind everything is God. Because it doesn't happen by itself. And it's not happening by like some machine. Even a machine is made by somebody, right? Even a phone or a machine of any kind, somebody made it. Who made this? And when we start to understand that, we arrive at God. And when you arrive at God, then you say, well, what's possible with God? Yes, I can go to church, temple, mosque, wherever else it is, and look for God and pray to God and ask God for what I want. But how about if I went to God and asked for nothing and I said, all I want is you. All I want is you. Your love is all that I need. You are my everything. I give myself to you. And it's at that point you'll find that God reciprocates and says, I give myself to you. You are mine and I am yours. And that's the kind of relationship we want. And that's the kind of relationship Arjun has with Krishna. And now that Krishna's gone, he feels and realizes that all his power and all that his gifts and everything else have gone with Krishna. Krishna was the source of all of that. And when that source dries up, there's nothing left. Arjun continues, all our friends and relatives in Dwarka, Dwarka is the land of Krishna, where he was. It's actually an island that was outside of India, on the western front of India, near Gujarat. And they found that island now. They found those palaces of Krishna and everything there, as we talked about a few weeks ago. So he says, all our friends and relatives in Dwarka were cursed by the Brahmins, and as a result they all became intoxicated with rice wine and fought among themselves with sticks, not even recognizing one another. Now all but 4 or 5 of them are dead and gone. Factually, this is all due to the supreme will of Krishna. So what happened? When Krishna left the world, he also made sure that all his relatives and family members who had actually come with him also left with him. So some excuse has to be there. Just like when Krishna leaves the world, he leaves when he's laying down in the forest somewhere and a hunter shoots an arrow and the arrow hits Krishna's foot. Now, have you ever heard of anyone dying by an arrow hitting their foot? No, never. But Krishna dies. It's not that Krishna dies. It's that he appeared, and when he appeared as a little baby, he showed his 4-handed form as Vishnu, as Narayan, to his parents because they were scared. They were in a jail at the time and they thought, oh my God, Kans, the king, is going to kill our baby. So he showed them there his 4-handed form and said, no, my parents, you are safe, don't worry, just do what I'm telling you and no one will be able to harm you or me. So similarly, in the way that he appeared very magically and mystically, in the same way he left this world, and those who are subject to mundane thinking will say, oh, Krishna died. No, Krishna doesn't. Krishna appears and disappears like the sun appears and disappears. In fact, he says, never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, and never in the future shall any of us ever cease to be. So Krishna claims right there in the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita that he is immortal, eternal. In fact, so are you. It's not just him. And that you've always been together, and that your journey here is a temporary one. We are not meant to be here forever. We are meant to return back to him, back to the spiritual world. And what happens in the spiritual world? All those wonderful, exciting things that I was first telling you about, the different kinds of relationships that they have with him, the kind of love affair with God. All of that is what the spiritual world is about. So Krishna's family had all disappeared by his will. Sri Krishna caused the members of the Yadu dynasty, that is his family members, to relinquish their bodies and thus relieved the burden of the world. Actually, they had become quite arrogant at that time and they had become a little carried away by the world, as tends to happen with all of us. This action was like picking out a thorn with a thorn, though both are the same to the controller. So the example given here is that sometimes when a thorn pricks your foot, you may need to take another thorn to take out that thorn. So similarly, his family members, the Yadus, had become a little proud and arrogant. And so a lila, a pastime, was created in which they would all die. The story is long about that one, and I don't think I'll get into it today, or I don't think I'll get into it. But it is there to be read, and it's just how the whole dynasty got wiped out. And then Arjun continues, he says, now I am attracted to those instructions imparted to me by him, in the battle of Kurukshetra, the Bhagavad Gita, right? So he says, I'm attracted to those instructions, I'm remembering those things he taught me, because they are impregnated with instructions for relieving the burning heart in all circumstances. What is one of those instructions? Krishna says, so now that he is gone, now Krishna is gone, so Arjuna has to remember, for one who is born, it is certain he will die, and for one who dies, it is certain he will be born again. Those who are wise lament neither for the living nor the dead. Why? Because they know that death is actually an illusion. They know that there is no such thing as death, not for the person, not for the entity, not for the soul. That's who you are. You're not the body, you're not the mind, you're not the stuff that you've got, though you may think so, though your ego might believe that. But that is not true. The truth is you are the soul, and as such you are indestructible. You are an eternal being. So remembering those instructions of Krishna is now helping Arjuna be able to deal with the separation from his beloved friend. Thus, being deeply absorbed in thinking of the instructions of Krishna, which were imparted in the great intimacy of friendship, and in thinking of his lotus feet, Arjuna's mind became pacified and freed from all lamentation. So that is the result of immersing ourselves in this spiritual wisdom, is that we become free from the illusions of this world. We become free from the suffering of this world. We become free from lamentation. So as Arjuna remembered these things, his mind became pacified. See, the mind needs to understand things. And that's why the reading of books like the Bhagavad Gita can be so useful, because it puts things in perspective. Without that, what's happening in our world today is that we see a world which does not have this guidance, does not have this information, does not understand these things. And as a result of which, there is so much fear. And that fear leads us to want to escape. And to escape, we do anything. We get ourselves busy with video games, with TV, with drugs, with alcohol, with partying, with whatever we can to try to escape the fears that lie behind the surface. We all live in fear. And the ultimate fear is the fear of death. But how do you overcome that fear? Through the instructions of these great literatures. When you begin to understand that you are an immortal being, that death is not going to happen, and that you have unlimited chances to work out things in this life. You can take your time. You want to take 1,000,000 lifetimes to work it all out? Go for it. But while you're here, just know that there's going to be a lot of stuff going on, as you've seen even in your own lifetime. So much is happening, so much up and down, so much upheaval in the world, and then so much upheaval in your own life, and then so much upheaval will happen in your body, and so much upheaval happens in your mind. There is so much that if we want, we can choose to get out of it. What is the pathway? The pathway is simple. Learn to quiet your mind, learn to open your heart, and learn to love God. Because that's the pathway, the simplest pathway. Of course, there are other pathways, and there's plenty of them, and I'm not denying any by doing that. I don't mean to say that one way is better than any other way. I just want to be super clear about this. Whatever path calls to you, do that. Whatever way is right for you, do that. But just know the options that are available, and then make your wisest decision. Ultimately, it is a question of what calls to you. I don't believe in this idea that there is one way or one truth, or there is one ultimate solution to everything. That's what causes fanaticism. That's what has caused so many people to be conflicted against each other, even in the name of God. But there is no such thing. I think that's the difference between the Abrahamic religions and the Vedic system. The Abrahamic religions were all about, this is the only way, this is the truth, this is the ultimate path, and everybody else is going to hell. Yeah, But when you look at the ancient systems, and especially in the East, particularly as they derive from the Vedas, you will see that all ways are recognized. All people are recognized. Whether you are an atheist, whether you're a spiritualist, whether you believe God is light or God is nothing, or you believe God is everything, or you believe God is a person, or you believe you have a love affair with God, whatever it is that calls to you, do it. But do something. Right? Whatever you do, do it with passion. You believe there's no God, do it with passion. See where it leads you. You believe God is light, do it with passion. See where that leads you. And if you believe God is an incredibly beautiful being who I can have a loving relationship with and who loves me eternally, then do that with passion and see where that leads you. See? Ultimately, as Krishna points out in chapter 12 in the Bhagavad Gita, all paths lead to Him. Whichever path you take, ultimately you land up with Him. Whether you hate Him or you love Him, you land up with Him. Even the great asuras, the demons who hated Krishna when He was here and who tried to kill Him and who did so many things, tried so many ways in which to be able to kill Him, He ultimately gave them moksha, liberation. He killed them and gave them liberation. So that's the quality of mercy. That is the quality of divinity. It is not about superiority, my way is better than your way. That's egocentric. That's the way of the ego. That is not the way of God. And unfortunately, people have given God a terrible name by these kind of actions of trying to prove one thing is superior to another. I'm sorry. That's like my car is better than your car, my house is better, my country is better than you. No, that's all the way of the ego. And they've brought that into religion and they've brought that to God. That is an insult to God. That is not the way of God. Arjun, through constant remembrance, his devotion grew. So as we remember God, as we think of God, as we meditate on God, our devotion grows. Especially as we read about the Leela, the pastimes, the activities of Krishna through the Bhagavatam, we begin to develop a greater affinity for God. And then it says here something very profound. His devotion, through constant remembrance, his devotion grew, and all the trash in his thoughts subsided. Whoa. All the trash in his thoughts subsided. Why? So the path is mentioned like this. Shravanam. Shravanam is listening, as you are doing right now, about God. Kirtanam, speaking about or chanting His name, as Chaitanya was saying earlier. Vishnu Smaranam. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam. The next step is remembrance. So the more we hear and the more we listen and the more we speak about God or chant His name, the more we begin to remember. All the rubbish that is in our mind now gets replaced. You know how it is, you listen to a song, they play these popular songs, you hear them again and again and again, and soon they're impregnated within your brain, and now the mind is playing it back to you again and again. Or if you hear crap, or if you tell yourself nonsense, that I'm stupid, I'm an idiot, what is wrong with me? Well, then your mind, if you keep on saying that to yourself, your mind's going to keep on playing that back to you. Whatever you put in is what you're going to get out. They used to have a saying back in the early days of computers. They called it WYSIWYG. No, I'm sorry, that wasn't it. That was what you see is what you get. But there was garbage in, garbage out. That was the acronym they had for in the computer language. So it's the same applies to us. When we put garbage into our minds, the old garbage is going to come out of our minds, right? We think nasty thoughts, we will do nasty actions. But if we think about God and we think about spirituality, and we think about divinity, and we meditate on the Leela or the names or the pastimes of God, then that's what's going to fill our consciousness. And that's what's going to ooze through the pores of our body and through our eyes and through our voice. And that's what we'll bring to the world. And the world could do with a lot more of that, don't you think? So through constant remembrance, Arjun's devotion grew and all the trash in his mind and in his thoughts subsided. The doubts of duality were completely cut off. The doubts of duality. What are the doubts of duality? The doubts of, I like this, I don't like this. This is good, this is bad. The whole operating system of the mind is based on duality. This is right, this is wrong. I like you, I don't like you. All the ways of duality will cut off. Because then you enter into non-duality, that place of realizing there is beauty in everything and everyone. Thus Arjuna was freed from the three modes. And see, this is the key. Once you go beyond duality, then this is what happened to Arjuna. He was freed from the three modes of material nature. In other words, the influence of the world is no longer upon you. You have become freed right here in this world. The Vedic system talks about salvation here and now, not in some distant future, not in some other world, but here and now. And that's what Arjuna is experiencing. He is experiencing freedom from the duality of the mind. He is experiencing freedom from the judgment of the mind. He is experiencing freedom from the way in which the mind controls and has power over us. Thus he was freed from the three modes of material nature and placed in transcendence. There was no longer any chance of his becoming entangled in birth and death, for he was freed from material form. See, once that happens, then you no longer need to come back into this world. Upon hearing of Krishna's return to his abode and the end of his dynasties, King Yudhishtira, that is Arjuna's older brother, the king, decided to join him in the spiritual abode as well, decided to join Krishna in the spiritual abode as well. The Supreme Being, Krishna, relinquished the body which he manifested to diminish the burden of the earth. So that's why Krishna had come. He had come to diminish the burden of the earth. There was a lot of evil stuff going on. There were a lot of people who were harassing others. There was a lot of... We're coming to that time now, right? So he had come to diminish the burden of the earth. Just like a magician, he relinquishes one body to accept different ones. When Krishna left his earthly planet, this earthly planet, from that very day, Kali, who had already partially appeared, so there's a personification of this age, or this time that we live in, of Kali Yuga, that personification already had partially appeared, now became fully manifest. So the age, this time, became fully manifest to create inauspicious conditions for those who are endowed with the poor fund of knowledge. It means those who have true knowledge, true wisdom, will not buy into the influence of this time. Yudhishthira was intelligent enough to understand the influence of the age of Kali, which is characterized by increasing avarice, falsehood, cheating, and violence throughout the capital, the state, the home, and among individuals. So he wisely enthroned his grandson, Parikshit, who was trained and equally qualified as the emperor and master of all land bordered by the seas. So this was a very important factor. Parikshit was not only the grandson of Yudhishthira. After all, the sons of Yudhishthira had been killed by Ashwathama, as we talked about earlier, but now his grandson had survived. Parikshit was extremely qualified. A king should be qualified, should not just be there because out of birth, but because he's qualified to be a king. He's a Rajarshi, a saintly king. That's what was needed. And that's what Parikshit was. And a lot of the Bhagavatam is about the story of Parikshit, and we're going to hear a lot more about him, this grandson of Yudhishthira. The king, Yudhishthira, then relinquished all his garments, belt, and ornaments of the royal order and became completely disinterested and unattached to everything. Then he amalgamated all the sense organs into the mind, and the mind into life, and life into breathing, his total existence into the embodiment of the five elements, and his body into death. Then as pure self he became free from the material conception of life. He then dressed himself in torn clothing, gave up eating all solid foods, voluntarily became dumb, and let his hair hang loose. All this combined to make him look like an urchin or a madman with no occupation. He did not depend on his brothers for anything, and just like a deaf man, he heard nothing. He then started towards the north. So from New Delhi, Hastinapur is what that was called back then. He started heading to the north, which is where the Himalaya mountains are. He headed towards the north, treading the path accepted by his forefathers and great men to devote themselves completely to thoughts of God. His younger brothers decided to follow in his footsteps. They too decided that the lotus feet of Krishna are the supreme goal for all. Therefore they meditated on him without interruption. This picture gives you an idea of what he looked like then as he walked away with his brothers following him. The spiritual abode known as Goloka, Vrindavan, is attained only by those who meditate upon the One Supreme without deviation. The wives of the Pandavas, Draupadi and Subhadra, also attained the same destination as their husbands. The subject of the departure of the sons of Pandu for the ultimate goal of life, back to home, back to Godhead, is fully auspicious and is perfectly pure. Therefore, anyone who hears this narration with devotional faith certainly gains the devotion of God and the highest perfection of life. So with that, we end this chapter of the Bhagavatam. I would like to invite any of you that have any questions to come on in. I'm just going to switch over from Zoom so that you can join us here. Do it here. All right. So, does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask? It's been a lot in here, I know. So, if you found yourself... Okay, I have some questions from Cindy. She says, let's bring this up here. Seems I cannot. Oh, I see why. Okay. Cindy writes, better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. Once enlightened in spiritual love, then later feeling a loss of separation, having the experience knowing to forgetting. Yeah. Then she writes further, to remember is at least a thread back to an affinity with the divine. Even this is difficult in these times during the Kali Yuga. Thank you for all these wonderful comments that you make, Cindy. I really appreciate it. Yes, it is very painful to have found such a great love and then to lose that love through separation. But we notice that even in the case of the great sage Narad Muni, he has this vision of God, of Narayan actually, and then as a child, and then that vision disappears, never to be seen again. But that built his hunger, that created his thirst for wanting to keep progressing on that path. And so it is with all of these, whenever there is that kind of experience, any of you who've had a near-death experience, any of you who've had an experience of any kind of spiritual awakening, if you've had some kind of mystical experience, you know how powerful that is. Because now you've tasted something, the likes of which does not exist in this world. And now you're seeking that everywhere. Wherever you go, you want to find that. The king Parikshit, we're going to talk about more, who now was enthroned as the king, he had seen Krishna within the womb, because Krishna had come and saved him from that Brahmastra that had been fired against his mother and trying to kill him when he was in the womb. And because he had seen Krishna within the womb, he was now hungry to find who was this that I had seen. I want to find this being. I want to find who this was. And so wherever and whenever you've had a mystical experience like this, you will find, I've come across so many people who've had the experience of oneness with everything. Others have had near-death experiences where they found themselves in the light. All of those experiences make us hungry for more because we realize there is a dimension beyond this one here, and we realize this is not everything. There is much more to life than what we see here. And for any one of you who've had that experience, I know you are hungry and you will want this And this here in the Bhagavatam will give you the sustenance, the food that you've been looking for. And maybe you need to read others too. I was reading the work of Rumi today, in which he talks about, there's this poem called the reed, the song of the reed, or the reed song, something like that. And then he talks about the separation the reed in the flute feels for the place where it came from, the bank of the river where it came from. It was too long a poem to bring up today, but I just was so delighted to read that. And he's talking about the same thing, that separation from God, that deep, intense feeling of love and wanting to have that all over again. He compares it to how the reed in that bamboo flute feels about that memory it has of the reed bed from where it came. And similarly, we have this memory of where we came from. Somewhere implanted within our soul is a memory of forever love, of forever happiness, of forever life. There is a memory within us, and we are looking for it everywhere, and we're not finding it. Just as we look for our keys when we misplace them, but they were in our pocket all along. Similarly, the things we are looking for are inside us. And they're coming from a memory of another time, another place, a place in which we had all of this. We had what we're looking for here, and nothing of the world is quite able to satisfy us. So it's quite sad. All right, anybody else have a question? Anyone else want to say something? Please speak up, or forever hold your, or at least for today, hold your peace. It's a labor of love to bring this to you, and I want to thank you so much for being here, for listening, for bearing with all the technical problems we've had on this channel. And I thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for supporting me with all your love. And please keep watching, please keep coming. I value your presence here. You encourage me, you keep me going. Without you, I would not be able to do this. So thank you for being here. Jai Shri Krishna. Hare Krishna. Thank you.